This here is the next card that we're going to do. So we're going to do some watercoloring again, but we're going to do it within a stamped and embossed image. So the embossing is done exactly the same way as I did for the sentiments at the beginning. I'm just using this cute butterfly set, and you can pick whatever one you want. And really, it doesn't need to be a butterfly. It can be whatever image you want, but let's get to it. So I am, because I'm doing watercolor, I am using watercolor cardstock, because otherwise, if you don't use watercolor cardstock, most cardstocks don't enjoy being watercolored on. They tend to bubble and it doesn't look too good. So the embossing powder, or the embossing, completely resists the Inka Gold. Now, if by chance you get a really, really thick layer and it seems to cover your embossing, let me try to do it right here. There. So see how it's kind of covered some of that black? All you do is wipe your brush off and just kind of thin it out a little bit so that it resists. Sometimes if you get a bit too much of the wax pigment or whatever it's called on there, the embossing will resist it a little bit, but it's super easy to get it back to seeing those lined images, or seeing them a little bit more clearly. And I just use my paper towel and clean my brush off. For this particular one, the colors are kind of in the same tone, so I don't really have to worry about contaminating anything. If by chance I was going from something dark to something light, I would want to squeeze my brush to get the color out of it before going into the lighter color. And you can see that I'm not super English is hard today. I'm not super careful when I'm watercoloring. I do have some that has gone outside the lines, but as soon as I go over it with a different color, it re-moisturizes that wax and blends it right in. There we go, a little bit on this side now. And like I said, it doesn't need to be a butterfly, it can be whatever image you want. And you don't necessarily even need to emboss it. I like the look of an embossed stamped image because it kind of has a raised, it raises the image and it just gives it a little bit more oomph. Especially when you're using the wax paste, it's a lot easier to resist the embossing by just going back over it. If you're just using a permanent ink, then it would be slightly harder. It wouldn't be super hard, but I just like the look of it. And then I'm gonna put a little bit of brown in the body there. There we go. Clean my brush. Set that aside to dry for just a couple minutes while we do the background. Now the background is a wood grain embossing folder done with black watercolor paper. I really like the black watercolor paper with this because I like the look of the black watercolor paper, but because we have to mist the embossing folder before we do the embossing, the black paper, the watercolor paper, just takes the misting so much better. And I'm just combining the three colors that I used for the image. You could do the brown as well, but I didn't for this. I just did the violet, the pink, and the turquoise. And once again, just like the white one, I tend to go over and blend colors that are beside each other. I just like the look of that. And isn't it incredible how much different it looks on black embossing versus white embossing? Neither is right or wrong, but doing it on the black it just kind of seems to pop a little bit more. The metallic looks a little bit different. All right, I want a little bit more of that purple in there. And because these are all kind of in the same color tone, I'm actually using the same finger. I'm not too worried about contaminating them. but I certainly could be using a different finger if you were worried about that. All right, clean it off. Just put the lids on there lightly, and let's glue the card together. This particular 3D folder doesn't have quite as much dimension as like the brick one does, so I find that it's not as challenging to glue it down. The brick one especially, I find, because there's so much dimension to it, I typically need to put the glue on it, put it down, and then put something on top of it to hold it in place while it dries, because it likes to curl up a little bit because of that dimension. This is already dried. I can feel that it's still a little bit damp, but I'm not moving any of the color around when I'm doing this. So typically I would wait for the cardstock to be completely dry and not be gluing it down when it's damp. But for this, it will work. Might just have to hold it down a few seconds. And then last but certainly not least, I'm putting the sentiment. So I've got one that's white embossed on black because I wanted it to pop a little bit and I wanted that black to shine through. I could do it on a purple cardstock embossed with white, just to tie in with the card base color. But I think because the purple is so dark, I couldn't do it with purple embossed with black because I don't think you'd see it. And there we go. And there is our third card done. So the next card, we're going to be working on a black embossed background as well, but we're going to use a different technique on it. I'll see you in that video.